Good afternoon, and welcome to our Public Safety Committee meeting for March, here on the 29th of this month. We want to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We're going to begin by introducing you to our newest member of the Public Safety Committee, and that's Mr. Marlon Fyan. Mr. Fyan would give you an opportunity to say a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Did you want me to make a little intro, or?
If you could, sure.
Okay. Basically, my professional background has been in construction, a little over 50 years. 1980, went in business. That company is Fyan Zylstra Electric, and I am officially retired, but kind of attached like a dangling participle, I think. So I'm pleased to be here. I bring some, certainly the perspective of construction safety. Learned a few things along the way, as well as for the past 7 years have served on the Safe Places Committee that was formed under Mayor Hartwell, which is really about gun control, and learned not a few things there. So that's a big public safety issue yet to this day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlon. Again, welcome. We'd like to go ahead and move to the first item, which is renaming of Franklin Fire Station to Martin Luther King Jr. Fire Station.
Excuse me, I don't see anyone from fire here, but I can speak on the subject. The fire department is glad to be able to rename the Franklin Fire Station to the Martin Luther King Jr. Fire Station. This is an administrative a task as set forth by the change that the commission did for Franklin Avenue or Franklin Street and Cesar Chavez. As you know, that we named Franklin Street to Martin Luther King Jr. Street, and as a part of that, the fire department will be renaming their fire station. Their practice has been that the street that the fire stations are on, the names of the fire stations follow that. There will be a community celebration tomorrow on the 30th. I'll make sure that you all have invitations to that, the Public Safety Committee, and I believe a press release is going out today on that subject. And also we have the National Forum for Black Public Administrators are in town for their national conference, and representatives of that organization will be also on hand. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I apologize. It's probably on me that the fire department's not here, so I'll apologize up front for that. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Sure, Mayor.
So Chair, I'll just add, I think I know why they're not here. It's because there's a statewide firefighter convention in town, and I was there this morning with Chief Lehman to do the welcome to hundreds of guests that we have here in our city that our fire department are hosting. So I'm sure that's where Chief Lehman continues to be.
Thank you.
But this is great. I'm glad to see this move forward. And tomorrow at 12:30, we'll be celebrating this name change.
Thank you. Yep, 12:30 p.m. at the Franklin Fire Station. And again, I'll make sure that this committee gets that information. And again, there's a press release going out for the public today also.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Santi.
Appreciate it. Our next item is a introduction for some, but for others, we've been had the opportunity to get to know our new police chief, Eric Winstrom, and so we'd like to give you an opportunity to speak to the Public Safety Committee.
Good afternoon. Looking at the committee here, I'm fortunate that I'm not a stranger to any one of you. I've been fortunate to have the chance to speak to each of you, even if briefly individually. I'm thankful for that. I just want to say that my priority as police chief, as it should be, is the prevention or the reduction in violent crime. Since I've been here on March 7th, unfortunately, we've had 4 shooting incidents. That's a great concern. Looking at the activities of the Grand Rapids Police Department, year to date, there have been 142 illegal weapons seized by the men and women of the Grand Rapids Police Department. In the brief time that I've been there, I've made the assessment they're doing an incredible job on that front. There's more work to be done, including I've already taken the steps to reach out and develop a strong relationship with our partners over at Cure Violence. And I'm very optimistic that relationship moving forward so that we can take every advantage, not just to ensure that crime victims are brought to justice, brought justice for, but also that the prevention of crime is a top priority. I don't want to minimize, though, quality of life offenses, which interestingly has been what I have had the most volume of communication from the community. And to throw out one example, that's the use of illegal motorcycles, four-wheelers, and off-road vehicles in the downtown area, which is a problem that's really taken place. It was highlighted by across the country in metropolitan areas because as businesses went to remote working, as restaurants shut down during the pandemic, there was more freedom for and less enforcement of traffic laws downtown, and so it became more common. And it's an issue from the jurisdiction that I came from, and it's an issue here. And the activities of these motorcycles and four-wheelers, they range from disruptive to downright dangerous. So I just want to give knowledge to the fact that quality of life issues and crimes are important to me as well. You know, I did look at the best practices across the country and examined the policies related to the Grand Rapids Police Department pursuit policies. And you know, the activities of these riders, oftentimes they actually seek the attention from a police helicopter, a police pursuit, police interaction, and that is often something documented by themselves on GoPro cameras and posted on YouTube that they want the police interaction. So whereas the instinct of many police officers is often chase the criminal, that's not always the best thing to do. So when we're looking at this issue, we're going to do it thoughtfully. We're going to look at different enforcement options that we can do safely, keeping in mind the safety of bystanders, our police officers, and the riders themselves. So having said all that, I'm excited to have two of our Grand Rapids Police Department's finest today, Officer Huffman and Officer Weiss, who are part of the code compliance team, and they're going to provide you a presentation this afternoon as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions for the chief? Anything? Yes, please, Mayor.
Yeah, so Chief, thanks so much. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I really appreciate you speaking to the issue around motorcycles. I know those of us who are up here who are elected, we've heard about these complaints. Many of us have been downtown a lot lately as things start to come back to life, and have witnessed firsthand the dangerous activity that we're seeing on our streets, and not just downtown, as you know, but even in some of our neighborhoods. It's absolutely unacceptable. It's not just disruptive. It really is dangerous, particularly for pedestrians and folks on scooters and bikes. And as more people are out and about and active as the weather warms up, it is incredibly concerning. So thank you for not just responding to the emails and the calls that we have received. I know you have been in conversation with a number of folks in our community, but thanks for looking into what we can do to respond to this and to really address it in an effective way that keeps everybody safe. So thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No? No? Okay. Thank you, Chief. We'll now move on to the final item on the agenda, which is an update that's going to be given from the Grand Rapids Police Department's code compliance team.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I am Jeremy Huffman. I'm one of the code compliance officers. Just a quick background. I've been an officer for about 25 years with Grand Rapids PD. Grew up in Grand Rapids, went to Grand Rapids Central High School up the block. And I was community officer for about the first 19-ish years or so. And then the last 4 years, I've been doing the code compliance liaison portion of it. And this is Officer Shelley Weiss.
Good afternoon, Officer Shelley Weiss. I have 22 years on with the department, and I'm a transplant from Bay City, Michigan. And I originally worked in the Saginaw area where code compliance was not as strong, and I am very passionate about my position here because I do see the impact that it makes for our city.
So we're going to start with the objectives for what we do here. So we're the liaison officers. There's obviously two of us here, and between the Grand Rapids Police Department, neighborhood service areas, the specialty units, and the development center, which is kind of our main focus. Our offices are located at 1120 Monroe in the Development Center, so we work a lot with Mr. Jordan, who's in the room right now, Planning Department, really anybody in the Development Center that needs anything from us. What we have found over the years is that code compliance officers, they're civilian people, they don't wear uniforms, they don't have badges or whatnot. They deal with the same type of calls for service as the police department. So the police department's there one night on a shooting, stabbing, whatever it is, fight, and then the next day the code compliance officers are there dealing with trash in the yard, and the same people that we just dealt with shooting. So we try to have a good communication, especially since we're in the same office, to relay these problem addresses, and we work as a collaborative effort between all of these city offices and the police department, just to keep everybody safe, including the city employees and the people in the neighborhood as well. So a lot of things we do, and surprisingly enough, we were talking about this earlier, but we do a lot of liaison and communication between the police department's detective unit and our code compliance people. And it's typically the major case detectives that we talk with the most. You would think the general case, which handles the lower crimes, we would talk to a lot, but it's really the major case for the more violent crimes that we do a lot of the intermingling with as well. So Mr. Jordan, on the little flow chart here, you can see Mr. Jordan's the code compliance manager, and then they have two supervisors, Scott Baker and Corey Slager, that we also work with as well. So the other thing we do is we partner with the neighborhood association. So we'll hold hoarder. That's later. That's later.
fine.
We'll talk about the hoarders later in the meeting. But yeah, we partner with the neighborhood association. So we'll do quarterly meetings with all of the neighborhood associations around, which includes the code compliance supervisors, the code compliance civilian staff, as well as the neighborhood association, the police service area captain, just so everybody can kind of be in the same room and we can talk about what the problems are, whether it can go from trash in the yards to abandoned cars to houses that are having real issues that are causing problems for the neighbors. So we all try to facilitate that. Some neighborhoods like it so much they do it once a month. It gets a little tricky with everybody's schedules, and then for COVID, we've been doing a lot of Zoom and Teams meetings, but fortunately in the last few months, we've been able to get back in person, which to me is very helpful. I understand that, but it's very helpful seeing face to face and being in the same room with people, so that's been very nice. Again, facilitate communications between city, county, state agencies to resolve community problems. Now, this is a huge list. Officer Weiss has another slide next that we deal with. I mean, we are in constant contact with Adult Protective Services because a lot of the folks that we deal with are elderly folks, and there's really nobody out there advocating for them. So, especially when it comes to code compliance problems, because really the end goal and really everything that we do is compliance, and it doesn't always have to be enforcement, but it's just some compliance in some way or the other. So Adult Protective Services is very helpful. We call in a lot of APS referrals, and which gets them money to help deal with some of the code problems. And then the hoarding issue, there's a whole different aspect that we'll talk about as well with that. Animal control, the fire department, when it comes to inspections, when they need officers there, unfortunately sometimes they need officers there as well. We'll deal with those. LARA, which is the state's licensing and regulatory affairs, we deal with that when it comes to mechanics and illegal mechanics and backyard mechanics. And again, it's also, our goal is compliance. So a lot of the mechanics, I started one with an example yesterday, is that, we find out that there's been a shop open on Division for 15 years. And somebody complained about it. Well, they find out that the guy didn't have a mechanics license. He didn't have a state mechanics license. He didn't have a fire department mechanics license. So with communication between Lara, us, the code people, and he was from the Dominican Republic, so he didn't speak English very well. So that was part of his problem. He couldn't pass the test. So all the communication, and really the end goal, like I said, is compliance. So we got the guy with the Lara agent to go to Lansing with a Spanish speaker to help him with the test. He passed the test, he got his license, he got his fire department license. So we didn't have to go down the enforcement route with him because of working in kind of a collaborative effort. So that is, again, what we like to do. We do a little bit with the MRA, with the new marijuana facilities. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but a lot of 61st District Court work crew, they help us in all of our health and safety cleanups, whether it's from abandoned homeless camps, or if camps become to such a problem with needles and trash and everything else that we have to clean up, they will help us with that. Officer Weiss and I have to kind of assist when it's occupied, just so that keeps the court service workers safe. And then the health department, any health department needs, whether it's tattoo parlors where they need an officer, whether there's, we get kind of requests for and all kinds of reasons. So the responsibilities. Now we do this, I should preface this, we do this presentation and we usually do it in about, an hour and a half when there's training. So we're trying to break it down for, the time that we have here. So just FYI. We partner, again, with co-compliance people in difficult cases. Safety, again, safety for everybody involved is what we do. We follow up on the drug search warrants for any drug search warrants that is at a particular neighborhood that's causing the neighborhood issues. We will work with the landlord to educate about what happened and assist them in anything that they need in the future to kind of mitigate the problem at those houses. We pass along a lot of anti-government, sovereign citizen. Unfortunately, we have several in the city that we have to deal with, and again, the police are dealing with them, co-compliance is dealing with them, so, and they are very anti-government, and we have to help with that as well, so. Communicate with commercial and residential property owners to attempt to get renters into compliance and resolve situations. Again, it's education on what's going on and what's happening in the neighborhoods, and sometimes, the property or the neighbors can call landlords and this and that, or even the residents of the houses, but we will assist any way we can in education and trying to help the landlords. And then the tenants, somewise too, sometimes they just don't know what's right and what's wrong. So we have to do a lot of education, a lot of phone calls, a lot of in-person visits to these things. So again, we use proactive problem solving to reduce the individual and the administrative burden of law enforcement. So it's a crime reduction, call reduction, burden on city services is what we do. If we see a call, if we will monitor the calls and we'll go to different meetings, and if there's houses or addresses that are getting constant complaints to the police department and co-compliance, we have a group approach to try to figure out how we can deal with this one way or the other. So we have occasional administrative search warrants that we'll have to do on certain houses. Sometimes they're involved with hoarding issues, and Officer Weiss will talk a little bit about that. And we do all the vehicle towing work orders, so yards that have, inoperable cars on them. And when it gets to the point, then we will work with the property owners and eventually get the cars out of there. Sometimes we have to tow them when they don't want us to tow them, but we work with them to try to get the problem solved, because that's really what we're trying to do. We partner with the city's cannabis manager and the planning department. So when all these facilities came, they all were required to have SEPTED plans, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. So we will do a yearly inspection at the cannabis facilities to make sure that they're following the rules they're supposed to be, what they said they were going to do in their security plans, as well as I always go through all the calls and make sure there's no calls for service there. If there are calls for service, then we go over what they are with the businesses as well. So far, it's been fine. There hasn't been any issues at this point. I mean, we've had a few alarm calls that we've been to a lot of, but we're dealing with that right now with the place. So again, that's more of knowledge and just talking to these facilities. Hey, you've had 12 alarms in the last 6 months, and that's an excessive amount of alarms for us to keep continually go to. So we make sure that they do that. And I would then always make sure that they're paid up on their bills for their alarms, or else I won't approve their city clerk's license. No, I'm just, we partner with the homeless outreach team and the community development's homeless coordinator, and we came up with a standard operating procedure to address the health and safety hazards. So we have a flow chart, whether city property, private property, occupied, unoccupied, how long it goes to for the outreach programs, and so we kind of standardize that process. So eventually it will come to us, and the HOT team has done a great job in getting housing, and I think you heard from them a few weeks ago. So that's helped a lot for not displacing people sometimes like it used to be. Sometimes they just have to go, and we didn't know where they went. Now the HOT team has been able to keep track of that and hopefully keep the streets clean as we can. So illegal use of properties, illegal nightclubs, unlicensed businesses. Sometimes you may hear about them. Sometimes they end in violence, and you've kind of read about those and you've heard about those. Different shootings at different illegal after-hours nightclubs. They'll have a party at a mechanic shop or a warehouse after 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes it goes on for weeks and weeks and we don't know about it, and then all of a sudden something happens there, and then we will get involved and again educate the homeowners, educate the property owners about what's happening, because a lot of times the property owners don't know. They rent it out to somebody for a certain type of, and then they didn't know that they had a nightclub or whatever it might be. So we do a lot of education when it comes to that. Officer Weiss.
Okay. Good afternoon, and as I said earlier, just here to talk about a little bit about the Grand Rapids Area Hoarding Task Force, just a little snippet with the time that we have. But you may wonder why we're involved in the task force. We actually formed this task force because I've been in code compliance for quite a few years, and prior to 2013, there was no hoarding behavior, hoarding disorder in the DSM-5 as a legal disorder. So there wasn't a lot of knowledge, there wasn't a lot of information out there. And what we would see as inspectors or police officers is, you know, and you all probably can think of one house on your block growing up where the windows were covered with black paper or enough drapes that you couldn't see in, and the person never came out. They're quite reclusive, and even as a child in the neighborhood, you're a little nervous about going over there because you weren't sure what was going on. And prior to 2013, a lot of our cases that involved homes with people that had hoarding behavior or experienced hoarding disorder, we would make notification through the mail or knock, and we wouldn't get any response. So there was not a lot of knowledge on what's going on. We couldn't peel back the layers to really see if there's someone in need of help in those circumstances. So natural enforcement was citations with fines, and we found that a lot of these individuals weren't paying the fines, so it would go to progressive enforcement to the point where they would actually get a misdemeanor on them, and they would fail to appear in court, so then obviously they would get a misdemeanor warrant for their arrest out. And some situations, the individual would pay, but then you wouldn't see any improvement in the property. So the fines were being paid, but then they're going to get another fine because the problem still exists. And we were in this hamster wheel of we're really not getting anywhere. And then me being the law enforcement assigned, once it went to misdemeanor warrant, I would finally, even if it was sitting outside long enough to be able to finally make contact with the property owner, I'd realize, wow, this is a mental health issue. This is someone that really wants to do something, but they're shameful, they're embarrassed. Maybe they're abandoned by family and friends because, quite frankly, they're difficult to work with because of the types of symptomatic things that come along with those disorders. And the family's exhausted and they don't quite know what left to do with them. So they end up being more reclused because of these issues. So the Code Compliance Department and the City Attorney's Office, we all came back and developed a better best practice that we think is what we have today. It's no golden ticket to fix hoarding because science tells us that hoarding can't be fixed. So we're dealt or left to deal with it in the community. And right now, I think in the last 6 months, we roughly work with over 60 properties of persons or residents that deal with hoarding or have hoarding disorder. So what's changed from them or then till now is we've got educated on how to speak with individuals, what the illness really is, how to communicate, what's the best practice of communicating with individuals. But again, we still get sometimes they want to be angry, they don't want help, and we've got to really work on breaking down that wall, that barrier. And so that first contact is with law enforcement to communicate, to say, does this guy want to shoot someone that comes to the door, or do they want to work with us, and do they want resources? Where's the credible threat here, so that code compliance can start getting involved. So that first assessment's really important for Jeremy and I to go out there and make contact at those homes and start peeling back those layers and see what's going on. And a lot of times they're seniors. And we do have middle-aged and some with children, but it's more rare, I would say. Most of our clientele is seniors that are vulnerable. They're expressing self-neglect by collecting so many things and items that the space in their home is not being able to use for its intended purposes. We're seeing the individuals that can't get into their bathtub or the shower because they have put so many items into it. We see that they can't cook on their stove because they haven't done the dishes in the last 2 months. We also see that they're not sleeping in their bedrooms, they're on recliners in the living room. We also see that this can be a generational disease. So sometimes you have family members, multiple family members in the same household exhibiting those same kind of behaviors, which only exacerbates the issue. Which, once the house gets full, what's next? It's going to be the garage, it's going to be the backyard, and we start seeing those things. And over the course of time, with my experience now, I'm able to probably ride down the street and already know probably what's behind the doors of the house, just from based on what I'm seeing outside. So we knew with the mental health issues, the minimum standard of safety, right? So we still need these individuals, whether they have mental health issues or they're just sovereign citizens or drug addicts. We all need to have a minimum standard of safety that has to be maintained. But this is a unique approach where we have these wraparound services, and as you can see on the slide here, of having these wraparound services, and what's our goal is to harm reduction, because we're not fixing it, right? Like I said, it's not something that is going to go away, but we can continue to keep things at a minimal level where we hope to add less trip hazards, less fire combustible rates, and we'll get into that when I itemize some of these things here, and I'll try to move through it a little quicker. But it's just really important for not only the person that lives in the household to be in a safe environment, but you also have infestation, the fire combustible rates that could exhume into the next door neighbors because of, and fire can speak on that, how more important it is to get extra fire trucks out there to address those houses, and also to the odors and just the pure hazardous things that come along with living that lifestyle. And we know that there have been cries for help in the past on welfare checks where the hospitals are taking them in, but then they get kicked back out right to the back, same living conditions. So I'm going to talk a little bit how this changes that in our approach. So when our officers, or Jeremy and I, go out and we start peeling back those layers, and if we can confirm that these people are living in the conditions that we're suspecting from what we've seen up to this point, we'll always make an adult protective service referral. This is a lot of times when we're working with seniors. If there's a child in the home, obviously that goes along with it. We are mandatory reporters. But one of the key things at that first initial visit is to, like I said, break down that wall a little bit and start saying, do you know what adult protective service is and what it really means when we make a referral? These are people that are going to be on your team to provide and attempt to get you the most resources necessary to meet the needs that you really want to be or have. This is not to scare you. This is not to remove you out of your home. Most people are not removed out of your home unless necessary. We are consistent in our communication with adult protective services, and we do that because we adopted the International Institute of Challenging Disorganization clutter scale. It's a 1 through 5 clutter scale, so 1 being like, we say college, teenager, or college, a dorm room maybe, to a 5 being, okay, now we do have to remove you. It's going to be a tough day for you, but this might be the beginning of the best day of your life down the road, because the alternative we know is not going to be better. And what happens is our patrol, or Jeremy and I, and we've both personally done this, dug people out of their homes after they've been deceased in a pile or in between their nightstand and their bed because they got stuck. And I can say that me personally have seen that. So it's really important for us to communicate with adult protective services and using the proper terminology and being on the same page so that case referrals get assigned. It didn't used to always be so easy to get assigned cases, where now I think we've had a much better success rate in getting those referrals assigned to caseworkers. With that, we have the city attorney's office. Obviously, we got our legal keeping us on track there. Our fire department, Jack Flinsky helps us out. We meet monthly. This team meets monthly. We go over the cases on what's out there, what we're dealing with, and who can help, and what ideas we can come up with as a collaborative effort. And Jack has a program with the fire department that if a lot of these individuals don't have smoke detectors, which would be the number one thing that we need to get in the house because of those high combustible rates and because of the clutter. Sometimes they're using hot plates to cook their food because they can't get to the stove. But we can get smoke detectors installed, and we do that. And also, fire department has a reporting system where if there is a call for fire to those locations, the officers know immediately to send another truck, more equipment, and prepare their guys and gals so that the injury prevention from the firefighter standpoint is important as well with those cases. County Animal Control, we don't have a ton of animal hoarding, but we do at times, and our goal is to get them to a safe situation where they can handle the amount of pets that they do have. We don't enforce you can only have a certain amount of pets or anything like that. It's about keeping the area tidy and neat to be able to have those animals live there safely with them. Kent County Health Department, if we get referrals that are outside our jurisdiction, Kent County Health Department will go out there and take a look, and they might consult back to us and just chat about what recommendations we might have. Life emergency services are involved with us, medical calls with the vulnerable senior adult group is obviously a higher risk for falls and medical. So any time they go to a medical and they see concerns that we're talking about, they'll make that referral to us so that we can start the process. Big thing here is early interdiction, early awareness, so that we can start harm reducing and hopefully not get them to where they get to a 5 and we keep them at a safer, lower level. Area Agency on Aging in West Michigan, if you're 60 or over, they'll look and see what kind of resources they can reach out and provide those personnel with. Michigan Fair Housing Center of West Michigan, just assuring the client's rights are being followed. Legal Aid of West Michigan, there's been times where we have property owners or landlords that aren't aware that hoarding is a disorder, and it gets kind of heated between the landlord and tenant. We can start educating the landlord about what this sickness, this disorder, this illness, what happens, kind of give them an idea of how that plays out, and hope to eviction prevention is our goal with that. Bethany Christian Services, grass cutting, snow plowing for seniors, things of that nature. Senior neighbors, financial assistance, filling out paperwork applications, excuse me. Our home repair services, just getting in the house and maybe that if they qualify for the home repair services, being able to address some of those problems that need to be met so that we can get them into compliance. And we talked about the Health and Human Services. The last two is GVSU, Western Michigan University. We partner with them. They provide us master's degree, excuse me, and bachelor's degree interns that are their degrees in social work, so they work with us on logistics, and also they get a dashboard view of what goes on around the community. So it's a great learning experience for them, but also they do a really good job on like I said, maybe talking a little longer with our clients, maybe the time that we don't have to spend, they can do a little bit more conversations on the phone and get more details that we need. But overall, this is a proactive and collaborative effort. It's led to fewer calls to services. It's fewer welfare medical checks, long-term solutions that benefit individuals in neighborhoods. For fewer condemnation proceedings, we don't have to condemn a house because we've got the people on board to harm reduce and get that to a low compliant level. And better fire prevention efforts, and we covered that earlier. And that is all I have on the task force. We do have a flyer too. It has our mission statement and things like that that we give out to the community. Again, we're looking at the community for early intervention. If they know of someone, I know in the past it's been scary to admit and tell someone that somebody you know needs help, but we can educate on why that's important because the alternative could be a lot worse.
Thank you very much to both of you. Appreciate it. Any questions, colleagues?
Yes, Commissioner Jones, thank you. I appreciate the work that you are doing. I have a concern about the word when you said hoarding. was a disease. Has it been classified from a medical standpoint that hoarding is a disease?
Yes, hoarding is classified as a disorder, and it is in the DSM-5, 2013.
Yeah, I understand.
Roughly.
I understand the disorder. But is
Yeah,
it
I
a
misspoke on the
disease?
word disease, a disorder.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to clear that up.
Nope, thank
And
you.
the other question is that on the properties, when you are working with families who are not in compliances with their properties, are those properties homeowner properties or are they rental properties?
They can be both.
What is the majority that you have, rental or homeowners?
You know, I don't think we've broken down I don't have those statistics with me. I don't know if, Eric, you do?
Probably 50-50.
About
Okay.
50/50?
50/50. Right. Okay.
Can you get that information to me? Oh, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Is this just for hoarding or the other things that we do? Just for the hoarding?
You're speaking
Well,
on hoarding?
I'm speaking on the fact that when you're talking about properties not being in compliance, as you said earlier, that you might go buy a house and somebody might have the house boarded up and you've made the necessary steps to get information out, to get some concern as to what's going on in that house. And when you talk about home ownership, I just needed to know in some of the areas of our city, are those homes that you're working with, are they homeowners or are they renters? When I say renter, is the homeowner someone who is renting the property out?
So, all right, I misunderstood. I thought you were speaking more to the hoarding behavior, but if you're talking about a whole picture, we could kind of look into getting specific data for that, because then that gets, one thing that's helped is the city's rental certification program, because that goes in proactively every 4 to 6 years and addresses violations.
Correct.
But as far as, home ownership versus rental, we deal with both all the time, but we can look into getting a little bit more specific data for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Please, Chris.
Wow, I'm so glad to know about all that you do, and it's been a real education, I think, for all of us. I didn't realize how complex and how much detail went into code compliance. So there's 2 officers, right? And then how many staff in the code compliance?
So we have 3 clerical staff. We have 4 seasonal inspectors that operate April through Thanksgiving. Their goal is to go out, and they deal with nuisances, so tall grass, trash, unsecure dwellings, buildings, things of that nature. We have 18 code compliance officers, and they're divided up into teams of 4 with a lead worker in each section of town, and they usually have a team, and then they go out from there on. And then 2 supervisors and 1 manager.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it sounds like you have a good team working.
Good. Colleagues, any questions? No? Questions?
No, this is very informative also to me. One question I've got is, what does compliance look like along the expressways and so forth, where we've got people that are kind of panhandling? Is that something that this group regulates also, or is that highway?
No, the panhandling along the highways and the corners and things like that, no, we don't handle that. Is that what you're speaking of?
Yes.
Okay. No, and then if you talk about, like, say, trash on the side of the highways as well, and that the state will have, like Kent County Road Commission does a lot of that along the highways, cleans up all the trash and at the corners, and
Sometimes it's a little bit of a safety issue when they're right on the curb or trying to, interface with cars, and I just wondered what the regulatory compliance is on that.
no, the police, if it's on the city streets, then the police department will be in, if they're blocking traffic or not letting cars or stopping cars driving down the road, as long as it's a city area, then we can handle it. The police department would handle that.
All right, that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? No? Comments? All right. Again, thank you all very much. It was very informative, and I appreciate the update, and we'll look forward to Commissioner Moody getting the information he is seeking. And again, thanks so much for also including the outcomes for the between July and December of last year. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other items, questions? No? Okay, very good. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.